discussing and developing things. However, what is most important is to still go forward, connect with people. Blockchain is all about community. So today, the topic that has been given to me is that why are banks so against crypto? So why is it that banks keep on blocking these crypto companies or crypto transactions? So I'll discuss this thing primarily from an Indian perspective, but we'll also bring in a global perspective, that it's not just the Indian banks doing it, it's also the global banks doing it. So from that perspective, let's just dive in. So when we look at, let's say, the Indian banks blocking or restricting their offerings, that is banking offerings, to traditional crypto companies. So what is the challenge behind it? So if I go back in time, what we realize is that before the Honorable Supreme Court's judgment of March 4, 2020, the banks were actually restricted clearly by RBI to offer their services to any crypto companies. However, after the effort being put in by the community, the Supreme Court of India passed a judgment on March 4, 2020, stating that crypto companies also have a right to get offered a bank account. And post that, things have opened up and crypto currency exchanges primarily started offering their operations to the crypto companies, and thereby the entire sort of banking system opened up. However, even after 2 years after that judgment, we realize that there are still challenges. And what kind of challenges are we looking forward to here? Challenges pertaining to RBI saying that, oh, we never restricted any banks. Whereas if you physically walk into any bank today and say that you're a crypto company, they will generally not open a bank account. So the bigger banks, the known banks, the government-backed banks, generally they will not open a bank account. So the question here is that, what are the top 3 reasons? What are the top 3 reasons that your banking access would be denied, or generally why are banks against cryptos or crypto companies, even if you're building a crypto exchange or a crypto product in India or outside India? So let's just look at the Indian context first. So the Indian government's stance, including the Reserve Bank of India's stance, has been that the function of issuance of currency, note the word currency. Earlier, we call it digital assets nowadays, but earlier they were started off by calling themselves as cryptocurrencies. So the Indian government felt that, okay, currency is a sovereign function. What does a sovereign function mean? Sovereign function primarily means that the right in the country to print the notes, the physical currency notes that we have, is with the government. And what crypto companies were doing is that they were minting these tokens, and these tokens almost at a certain stage became a method of exchange, even though they were not meant to be. Initially, they were not meant to be. So the first challenge that banks face is that these crypto companies are creating their own currencies which can work within that ecosystem that is allowed. However, once they start communicating outside of the ecosystem, and it becomes almost like a medium of exchange, people start using it as a means of service, giving certain trades and services. People started accepting USDCs and other coins. So government of India feels that this is a sovereign function, and thereby banks feel that, okay, USDT is like a threat to the Indian national rupee. That is the one challenge. So let's first talk about the challenges. First is this challenge. Second is the challenge regarding movement of money. Try to understand it this way. If you're building, let's say, a startup in India, let's say in Bangalore, then in case you hire a tech developer, let's say in California, now to move money from Bangalore to California is a Herculean task. It's a massive challenge. Why? Because Indian government wants to ensure that there's a genuine payment. You get an invoice, you deduct TDS, there's a 20% TDS in case you are outward remitting that value. And from that outward remittance of that value to the California guy will say, oh, I don't have any nexus in India, and thereby the 20% is like a total loss to me. So in case you've got to give him, let's say, $20,000 as his total value, he will receive only $16,000 or $4,000 a loss. So what these crypto entities did was that they made a bigger challenge or a bigger threat to these banking ecosystems by creating a borderless ecosystem. So you could remit. So it's like one single currency of the world. USDC can move, USDT can move across borders. Now, while it is exciting from a technology perspective, but the biggest challenge comes when you talk about movement of money from a country like India, which is more or less capital starved, to a country like Hong Kong or Singapore, which is capital has higher level of capitals and does not exercise any capital controls. What does capital control mean? Capital controls mean that any movement of money from your nation to outside of your country are not reasonably controlled by the government. It means that just like we do a domestic transfer, we can do an international transfer. So let's say Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, US, these are some of the countries which do not exercise capital control. You can just simply sort of remit the value online, just like you do it, let's say a domestic transaction in Singapore. A similar person can do an international transaction from Singapore to, let's say, Australia. Now, what these cryptos did was that they posed a massive challenge from a foreign exchange management perspective. What does that mean? It means that you could remit value from a country like India, which exercises capital control. It means it restricts that while outward remittance from the country is allowed, but it has to be reported to the AD bank or to the RBI. So what these cryptocurrencies did was that it challenged the very nuances, the very existence of the Foreign Exchange Management Act. As a result of this, we realized that there's a challenge around it. So in 2018, I personally wrote a right to information application to the Reserve Bank of India that these things are growing, these cryptos are growing. So what is your stance? Do you think that Foreign Exchange Management Act applies to cryptos currently or not? So the answer that Reserve Bank of India gave us was that currently crypto laws, that is cryptos, are not falling under Foreign Exchange Management Act. This was 2018. Now, post that, we feel that the stance is slightly changed. Why? Because the stance is primarily changed in the sense that now the government realizes that the movement of money is posing a certain threat to the foreign exchange compliances. And this is evident from this fact that there have been notices issued to the people who have remitted value outside in USDC or USDT or any other sort of cryptos outside India. And there have been notices issued, oh, there's a non-compliance of FEMA. While now this imposes a very interesting, I would say, anomaly. On one side, the government is saying that FEMA laws do not apply to cryptos. And secondly, they are saying that because FEMA laws don't apply to crypto, yet we are saying that outward remittance and moving value outside India to a nation, any other nation in the world, results in a FEMA non-compliance. So that's the second challenge. First challenge being sovereign function. The second challenge with the bank is pertaining to the movement of money resulting in non-compliance of FEMA. And there have been very strict notices issued, including enforcement directorate notices being issued, primarily that regard the FEMA provision. So in case you're building a crypto startup, just make sure that you're compliant from that perspective, especially the movement of cryptos cross-border. While on one side, the right to information reply says that FEMA laws don't apply, but in practice, they actually do apply. And the third challenge is that the government realized that, okay, through the Reserve Bank of India or any central bank of the country, we can actually go forward and issue what is called as a CBDC. A CBDC is a central bank digital currency. What does that mean? It means that just like any private organization can issue its own tokens, so the government of India will also, through Reserve Bank of India, issue its own tokens, which is like the digital version denominator of the Indian national rupee. So while CBDCs technically are centralized only, why? Because the Indian government would be issuing it, but they do offer some of the functionalities which is not available in the physical currency in India currently. So it is like a hybrid instrument between purely decentralized cryptos and a totally centralized Indian national currency. So I feel that these are three major challenges. Why? Because banks generally try to avoid or generally face a threat of their existence because of these three challenges. I feel that, I might be wrong, but I feel the next 10 years in India, especially because of the fintech revolution that is going on, I feel that the next 10 years will be revolutionary when it comes to revolution in the banking sector. I feel that all these physical banks which are present, and roughly about 40% of the total running cost of the bank is the physical cost, that is physical branches, physical movement of money and all that stuff. That's 40%, almost 40%, slightly less than that, but roughly 40%. Which means that if we are able to digitize this entire experience, and the next 10 years time, what we're looking forward to is that there would be banking license at the back end, and the front end would be fintech companies. So think of it like a Paytm bank kind of thing. They don't have physical branches, but you're able to transact and have trust of money movement. Now, of course, that's centralized. And now the next step would be to decentralize this entire money movement. Now, from this perspective, what is the biggest challenge is that the government of India will lose control on such transactions. Hence, a regulatory framework as of the current date is very much important, because you don't want random money to flow out of the country without the knowledge of the government. Now, this challenge is not just restricted to India. This challenge has been sort of witnessed and seen in other locations of the world as well. I'll give you the example of Dubai. Now, what Dubai has done is that it has embraced blockchains and cryptos, and especially in the last 6-8 months. And post that, what they've done is that they're offering 4 licenses for crypto companies. So in case you've got a sort of a company, you can go forward, have a crypto license in one of the 4 categories, primarily the categories are DLT, the distributed ledger technology, or the METAVERSE, the NFTs, or the crypto proprietary trading license. These are primarily 4 licenses. However, while you can set up your company, you can get these 4 licenses or any one of these licenses, but banking is still a challenge. So if you go to any traditional bank like RAC Bank or Emirates, NBD or something, they will still face challenges. So what people are doing is that they're keeping the banking system offshore, and they're keeping an entity in Dubai. So while I'm very excited about what is happening in the digital asset world, it is also imposing massive challenges to traditional banks and their very core function, that is money lending and money giving. That is how they make money. So the moment people start trusting more, a common man. So of course the techies, of course, do trust the digital ecosystem. But once the common man starts trusting these digital assets, then they will get into things like what is called a DeFi. What is a DeFi? It's like decentralized finance. It's like if you want a loan, you can get it through on-chains, and you can get it through methodologies which is purely digital. However, those mechanisms, those regulatory mechanisms have to be drawn today primarily for this fact that any person putting his money on the internet to lend it out to someone without any intermediary is a massive challenge as of the current date. So that is a very good area for the governments to step in and create legal frameworks for such kind of models. And this is what is going on in countries like Bermuda, which has come up with its own CBDCs. However, it is also looking at ensuring that it is not just CBDCs that they get restricted or limited to. They want to go forward and create an entire regulatory framework of ensuring that banks ultimately get replaced by fintech companies at the front end and the banking settlement system at the back end. And eventually, if I become sort of a connoisseur for the blockchain ecosystem, from that perspective, you will find that these fintechs eventually will become decentralized. And these fintechs, once they become decentralized, with people taking decisions about borrowing rate and repo rate and lending rates and putting assets on chain, tokenizing those assets and then distributing it amongst the people, whatever revenues that you earn from those assets. Let's say if you've got a piece of land, you build a building, you put the building on rent, whatever is the rent, you distribute it amongst the people who have initially subscribed to the tokens or the initial offerings, how the building was constructed. That cost was distributed amongst, let's say, 10,000 people. And 10,000 people get tokens, and then they get all these revenues directly into their wallets from the revenue source that is there against the building. So these are some of the use cases for digital assets, which, while they pose challenge to the current ecosystem, but they are also solving some of the major money movement challenges, liquidity challenges, challenges pertaining to trustworthiness. So today, if I give, let's say, open a current account and give that balance to a bank, if I open a current account in a bank, I do not know if my money is being given to someone like a Nirav Modi, and that person is manipulating the banking ecosystem, and ultimately I am at a loss. Why? Because smaller individuals, small depositors become vulnerable to cases where such loans have been given based on the competence of the bank officers. So there is surely scope for improvement. I do not see an immediate change in this because banking generally been a traditional sector. And we do not want any random person who's not even aware of the knowledge of blockchain to just jump in and get a online wallet and then offer his cryptos to someone. That is not, I don't think so. That is the next logical step. The next logical step would be to start creating framework. And this is what we have been witnessing in the Australian ecosystem. They are building smart contracts. A standing committee sort of formed by the government itself and by the parliament there has submitted a report to the parliament in Australia stating that the next big smart cities of Australia should be built on smart contracts where people are able to transact without manual interventions, and this is being run on social causes. That is, it is decentralized. So if I live in, let's say, Melbourne or Brisbane, if a streetlight gets installed in my locality, then I'm a direct contributor to that cost, as well as I'm a direct beneficiary of that service that is being offered. I think that is where we will ultimately reach what is called as true decentralization with democratization as well. Ultimately, people think that, decentralization will be able to solve all the things in the world. No, it will not. Decentralization with proper decision making at the node level is what is needed. Otherwise, what happens is that if there are 10,000 people involved in a certain ecosystem and only 200 people are taking all the decisions, it's still centralized only. So we have to get into democratic decision making for a distributed or a decentralized ecosystem. So those are my thoughts on why banks face challenges in accepting cryptos. So summarizing my 3 points. Point number 1 would be the initial challenges pertaining to the sovereign function. Point number 2 is pertaining to the cross-border trades, that is the FEMA compliances. And point number 3 are the CBDCs. And this is not just an Indian problem. Anyone who's building any DeFi app should feel very excited about what holds in place for the next 3-5 years in the Indian ecosystem, as well as the Southeast Asian ecosystem where the fintechs are growing. China also has come up with some CNY norms, and they're also testing out putting their entire Chinese yuan on Chinese currency on blockchain. They have already tested out basic transactions, $60 million, and those have been successful, is what some of my Chinese friends say. So from that perspective, we feel that the fintech ecosystem is moving Southeast Asia. India, with the super success of UPIs, already has built an infrastructure. And I feel that this is the right time, in case you are in the digital asset ecosystem, to build something on the lines of maybe a fintech app which is decentralized. People take decisions, decide on the rates of the loans, and do cross-border or maybe within the ecosystem loans which are more democratic. And the decisions regarding that loans, the terms are more favorable to the users because they are set up by the users for the users itself. So that's it from my side. I'm happy to take up any questions. Thank you so much for hearing me. Thank you.